This is the Out of Time Film Podcast, where your hosts Tom and John discuss everything from blockbuster films to TV and games like there's no tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to the Out of Time Film Podcast. My name is Tom and as always I'm joined with my co-host John, and this week we are talking about Secret Invasion. There is no enthusiasm in my voice.
This one show is definitely a show of all time. You know, it's one of those shows that you just watch and you just go, wow, that is a show. And then you just watch it and be like, oh yes, there's some actors. And then you go, yep, that is.
I think there was a narrative and I definitely experienced
Something happened. It's one of the plots you just watch and go, wow.
It's definitely part of the MCU. I've been told. Damn.
But okay, seriously.
Full spoilers ahead for anyone who hasn't seen it. Secret Invasion. Briefly explain the plot for those who don't know. Okay. Because there is a plot. There is a plot.
There is a plot
it's been
somehow.
Set.
Nick Fury learns a secret invasion of Earth by a fraction of shape-shifting Skrulls. Fury joins his allies, and together they race against time to thwart an imminent Skrull invasion and save humanity.
Doesn't that actually sound really interesting?
Like the graphic novel. The director didn't read the graphic novel at all, so that really concerned me. Like, Tom, you gave me that graphic novel when it was my birthday, and I really enjoyed that. There was like a really gripping story about, you know, these Skrulls that are taking over Earth and how long do we know these Skrulls. And here, this was just a mess. Honestly, it was just like trying to be this. I mean, it had a really interesting concept, you know, like this political thriller about these, you know, these Skrulls, where they're gonna go, and how long have we known about these characters? Are these Skrulls or not? But then that's just been used for shock value, especially for one moment. For one moment, that it destroys an entire character. I'm like, oh my god. And that's Rhodey. Like, Rhodey.
Oh, man.
You see, the writing in this isn't that incredible. A great example is Rhodey, because he's been a Skrull entire time since what people have speculated since Civil War or Endgame. The director even said he thinks it's been since Civil War that he's been a Skrull.
First of all, how does the director not even know when it's been? He's only speculating too. That's crazy. Second of all, there are so many moments that become so hollow and so pointless after if it has been since Civil War. I don't understand any of that. Like, it feels like everything in this show is just way too soon. It's too soon to kill Talos before I'd made an actual emotional bond with him. It's too soon to show Rhodey as a Skrull because we've never got to really see him outside of being defined by Tony Stark. It's too soon to introduce this tension between Fury and his wife before showing their genuine bond for extended periods. It's too soon to kill Maria Hill. It's just so...
It's too soon to kill Maria Hill! Oh my god.
Like, they're taking these side characters who have never actually had anything to do, who have never actually had any development on their own, and they are saying to them, right, we're going to explore these characters, and half of them they just kill as shock value. Like, even from the opening scene, it seemed like Martin Freeman, Everett Ross, is introduced, he's a Skrull, and then he dies, and until literally episode 6 that's it for him. And it's like, what is the point of that? Like, these things, the show is pointless. And as you say, the whole point of the comic, the whole point of the story is, who can you trust? Is it these people that you know and that you've learned to trust maybe aren't what they seem? You don't get any of that in this show. There aren't really any times, apart from with Rhodey, where there are characters who you don't know whether you can trust and characters who you have built that relationship with. The show really tries to lean into this aspect of political tension and of anyone could be a Skrull. But really, I didn't think it was ever unclear who was who and where everyone's loyalties lied. That was pretty clear cut to me the whole time.
Yeah, I just feel like this show wasn't really clear on the characters and stuff, because with Maria Hill, I thought Maria Hill was going to have like this, you know, she's going to return, she's going to be like, you know, a really important character, but that's just been used for, again, what you said about shock value, that's been used for shock value. And I just thought that was just completely wasted potential. She could be, as I just said, like an important character. It's just really weird plot choices or developments in the story, especially, okay, so I know this is in the graphic novel as well, where the Skrulls can also have powers, right? They can manipulate or take powers from other superheroes. In this one, it goes for a really weird direction. One of the characters, Kingsley Ben-Adir, yeah, he was great. He was trying to do his best in this. At the end, it was going for this build up, and this build up was just for nothing really. It was just like, oh, they just have the powers. They have every Avengers and Guardians' power. I just don't understand why that was a thing.
They were doing the whole Super Skrull thing.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
it was just so odd. Like, I've seen a lot of people talk about how Gaia is now the most powerful character in the MCU, and how literally the only way that they're going to be able to handle that in the story is to pretty much nerf her straight away whenever she appears
she's
next,
gonna get killed.
if she
she's
ever
gonna get
reappears.
killed. Yeah,
exactly, because there's no real tension to any of that.
There's no tension. Yes, there was no real conflict in this. It doesn't feel like a world threat. It has to go to that meme of Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, now this is Avengers level threat. And yeah,
this should have been an
exactly.
Avengers level threat.
Yeah, because in the graphic
really
novel, the Skrulls take over the Fantastic Four building and they turn it into a black hole. That's insane. And they take over S.H.I.E.L.D., they take over around the world and, take the Avengers hostage. And it's crazy.
Yeah, and that threat felt real the whole time, right?
Exactly.
It felt like something that could genuinely hurt anyone that you love. And you get to a point when there's this second team of a certain amount of Avengers, and you genuinely question, okay, which of these Spider-Men are the real one? Which of these two Wolverines are the real one? And that is genuinely scary. I think the only time in the show when the threat feels real and unique to the Skrulls was episode 3, where, we see the Skrulls impersonating a military officer to trigger a nuclear war. I thought that was much more interesting than something like a random bombing in episode 1 or anything like that. Like, seeing the Skrulls do stuff of their infiltration, it's much more compelling than them just impersonating characters who have no impact. Like, we see them all and they're like, yes, we are all the world leaders, and they form this kind of shadow counselor, and it's like, oh, it's the British Prime Minister and these various presidents from around the world. What was the point of any of that when we are just told that they have this threat? We never really see it. And I thought, in fairness, episode 3, I thought there was some decent tension and we get really close to a nuclear strike, which I thought was interesting. I thought at the time, okay, we're going to get into a good show now. This is going to be the turning point. And then it continued to be bad. And we get to the point where in the finale, it's just the most generic superhero ending. I saw a tweet about how the Secret Invasion finale is exactly what She-Hulk's finale made fun of.
Exactly, yeah.
It's just a huge smash and bash with a load of characters, something that's tropey, weightless, visually dull, unearned. And I mean, that tweet it's right. It was so underwhelming. The CGI really didn't meld well with, especially with Gaia, and whenever she was using powers. There's this one shot of Gaia with Drax's arm. It just looks really, really rough.
Yeah,
and
it just it's so out of place. It just felt like this idea that you just wrote down ages ago, and you're like, this is just terrible. Why would you combine every superpower into one? And by the way, this is Kevin Feige's idea, to have this idea of Gaia having these powers.
Yes, I heard about that. What's he going on?
And he said oh, this is like a rock, paper, scissors situation. That's what he said. I'm like, what?
What? Listen, Kevin.
What are you talking about?
No one's denying that you're. No one's denying that you're a good producer, but maybe leave the actual writing to the writers.
Okay.
It felt completely tonally inconsistent with the rest of the show. It was hilariously bad to the point where I genuinely kind of started enjoying it. It wasn't like Quantumania or The Flash, where I just felt empty and depressed the whole time. I genuinely was actually laughing at the end, and maybe that's because it was only 40 minutes a week instead of 2 hours at once. But
yeah,
I did find myself laughing throughout the show, and I'm pretty happy that I didn't binge it, because I'm pretty sure my mind would have just broken if I did.
I binged it.
Oh, dude, I'm so sorry.
Died inside. I was watching, because there were some great scenes with Samuel L. Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn, but just the rest of it, I was just like, why am I watching this? Why am I stuck in this endless binge watching of Secret Invasion? The cast list is stacked, but man, I just suffered with so many.
The cast is stacked, but they don't do anything with any of the characters.
Exactly.
My God, we start off and Talos is like, I lost my loving wife, and I'm like, oh, am I supposed to care about that? The whole time, Talos and Gaia have this relationship that's really rocky, and they're worried about whose side is Gaia on. is she really still loyal to her father or not? And really, like, it felt like stuff that should have been built throughout the season and not just there, like, at the beginning. Like, it's almost if there's been like 3 Captain Marvel films with these characters, and this was like the continuation of that. But no, this is 20 years after Captain Marvel, a movie which I've seen once and I really don't even remember that well. Like, these are just expectations that I feel the MCU are doing so much these days.
Yeah, I just felt like I was being overwhelmed with like information. I was like, oh, I don't really remember that because that's in a movie that I haven't seen in ages. And I wished we could have got like some new story development for this. I mean, there is a story in this, like it's new, but for the Skrulls side to it, like the Skrulls were, introduced in Captain Marvel, and you get to learn about that story, like they've been taken and then they have to find a new homes at the end of it. Here's the strange part, right? So as you've been watching the MCU, there's one other movie that really showed that there are Skrulls. Far From Home, at the end with Samuel Jackson and Maria Hill's character was just Skrulls the entire time, and it's like, oh, okay, that was used for shock value, I guess, and it didn't really explain much of why Nick Fury was up in the Saber that much. I just felt like that was a bit, I don't know, I just couldn't
none
really
of that
connect.
Just like, what did that do? We have seen Talos like twice before this, and in this one he dies, and I didn't feel anything. Like, despite, like, as you say, Talos and Fury have a pretty good relationship, and there are some good scenes. I would say that the show is at its best when the plot is focused on Fury, and you have those moments with him and Talos and him with his wife. But in general, I do not care about the characters. I just don't, and I think that is what makes this the MCU's worst show by far. Like, okay, when we talked about She-Hulk, even though that show was bumpy, I really liked Jen and her character. We talked about that. They made me care. I cared about Kamala and Miss Marvel. I cared about Steven and Moon Knight. I cared about Clint and Kate and Hawkeye. Like, all these shows are rough at times, but I still cared to some degree, even in small ways. I mean, this, I just couldn't give less of a shit. We have some incredible actors given extremely generic dialogue and in some of the most tensionless scenes in the MCU. Even Ant-Man and the Wasp is better at this because at least some of the characters have chemistry. I mean, this really is the bottom of the barrel for MCU shows. Like, the first episode has got so much generic tough guy dialogue, and so many people saying, Fury, you haven't been the same since the blip. And it's like, just from the get-go, this show was just another level of incompetent. I can't believe it.
Yeah, again, they bring up the blip, but the most annoying thing that we haven't even explored the blip. I mean, we did in Avengers Endgame, but not in the 5 years period. Like, they gave us that really weird 5 years later thing, and it was hard for me to connect with those characters. Like, oh, they've been in the blip, but what about the other characters, being affected by the blip? And then they just go, oh, you haven't been same since the blip. And, I wish there was some story, like how he felt with Nick Fury or Maria Hill about, like, the blip and how it affected everything. It was kind of like what sparked this secret invasion in a way, but it wasn't, really reinforced in a way. It was just there, like in the background, just like, it's just like kind of a reminder. I didn't have any affection at all. I just like, oh, okay, there's some characters there.
I don't think that any of the MCU shows or films really do anything with the blip, as you say. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff that they get into in Endgame, like when Scott comes back and everything's different and he's so scared and he goes back to Cassie. It's one of the best scenes in Endgame. But you think about the blip, the only thing that we know about those 5 years, the only thing that we've seen is one flashback in Hawkeye when he's Ronin. And that's about it. I feel like some of the earlier shows kind of did go into that period a little bit, and we get to see some of those consequences and some of the differences in life, like with Falcon Winter Soldier, which I would still say is the best MCU show. That shows the Flag Smashers, people who think that life is better during the blip, and we see that Sam is struggling after the blip financially, like in ways that I think is really something that I can connect to on an emotional level. Not just, oh yeah, Fury was scared, so he went to space. It's like, what? Like, that's not really something.
Why is he going to space? Why is he going
like,
to space?
Yeah, and like this show is him, like, he starts coming back to Earth and then he ends going back to space. And it's like the only difference is this time he's with his wife.
There was no arc.
Yeah, it's like it feels like the arc Clarke is for his wife and not for him. And
exactly, yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
maybe a more interesting show would be him in space, because this show is just a boring, Earth-based, bland, uninspired, like visually, like, can I just say this show costs $212 million. That's how much the budget is for what has to be the most uninspired and bland MCU show. This budget, which is only a little bit less than She-Hulk.
They didn't take any inspiration at all from the graphic novel. I sound like a nerd, like, actually, they didn't do that. I mean, literally, there's no inspiration. It just felt exactly what you just said. Like, it's just bland. It didn't really have anything at all. There was no conflict that you were invested in. It was like, these characters, where are they in their journey? But then you have Nick Fury who just goes up to space because he's scared. That's in the plot development. And you're just like, I don't really care about this anymore. And I feel bad for Emilia Clarke because she's been in 2 shows that are just incredibly terrible in their finale.
This is why Emilia Clarke needs to return to Star Wars
Come
and
on!
do something with Kira.
Come on, Kira.
But yeah,
like
seeing Emilia Clarke and seeing all the actors in this show, even when
really
it comes
hard.
to Samuel L. Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn and Kingsley Ben-Adir, as you say, and Olivia Colman, they're all just given nothing to work with. And there's so much in this show.
It's so awkward. It's so awkward when you watch. Okay, before when Nick Fury was talking about his past, they got in the train, and it was just Ben Mendelsohn and Samuel L. Jackson sitting in the train trying to talk about something. It was just nothing. No background music, nothing to build into, the aftermath. You're like this, oh my God, always lost moment, right? They just go on the train, they go, that's it. They just completely go in silence, trying to spark a conversation. And there's no music, like something to swell in with the emotion of like, oh my God, Murray Hill is dead. No, they just go on a train. And
there's literally nothing in this show that stands out. There's nothing. The only thing I'm going to remember is that final fight because of how ridiculous it is. But really, this is probably the show, or this is probably the story that has the least impact on the MCU. That's crazy. Nothing really changes apart from a couple of characters are dead now. Sure, there are things we can explore in the future, and I really hope they do, because, this can't have all been for nothing. But it just feels like such a waste of potential and a really boring way to do it. Like, a lot of people say that this is a really boring show and the most boring thing Marvel has done. And really, it is, because none of it is remarkable. None of it has anything to do. And the only things that you're going to remember aren't the good things. It's all the horrifically bad things. And that's not how it should be. Like, I think about any of the other shows and I think about the good of them. And I do remember all the stuff that I really liked in them, a lot more than the stuff that I hated. And I think that says something at the very least. And this is just really disappointing. And with that bloody intro, that AI intro, it's just soul crushing to see.
What a stupid excuse. What a stupid excuse that was about, like, oh, there's AI and there's scrolls, you can't tell which was which, how they're looking at us. That is the most stupid excuse. You can't use that for being, creative on the show. And this is why there's writer's strike and actor's strike. AI is about to be this art that can be generated in seconds, or stuff that could be written in seconds, and it's so terrifying, but it looks ugly. There is no soul. There is nothing to it that can help or benefit creating something. It's just there to be there. It's just like, oh, it's creating something cool. But it's just ugly. You watch the intro and you're just like, oh God, I don't want to watch this now. You just feel off-put about this whole thing. And if that's one of the excuses, that's another terrible excuse as well. Like, oh God.
I'm very thankful that there is a skip intro button, because I was taking very good use of that every single time.
Yeah, same.
Because I think about some of the best comic book show intros, Daredevil, Luke Cage, basically a lot of the Marvel Netflix ones. They were really cool, but they are amazing. And you can tell that there's a lot of vision that's put into these, and the way that those intros reflect what the shows are about and are done in really tasteful ways. Like, I guess this reflects what the show is about, but it's done so tastelessly. And you're right, this is what the strikes are all about. This doesn't come close to something that a real person could make, and it shouldn't. And the fact that these out-of-touch businesses and producers aren't paying these writers fairly, but are going to employ people to make AI stuff, that's horrible, and that's terrifying.
That's horrible. Even Netflix, right? Okay, going a bit of a tangent with this, right? Netflix, right? They are employing people $800,000 a year to use AI for helping with recommendations on Netflix. That is crazy.
They are so out of touch. They just don't understand. Like, Paramount recently said, we're not going to make any more original films. We're going to make films only focus on IP. That is the most stupid thing I've ever
Wait, why?
heard.
Why?
I don't even know.
Only IP?
But
What?
yeah, so
What?
no original content. Do they have any idea how IPs even became popular in the first place? I don't understand. Some of these companies,
That is the
they make
most
0 sense.
stupidest thing
We're
I
talking
ever
about,
heard.
yeah, we're talking about Secret Invasion right now, which is Marvel, which is Disney. And the things that Bob Iger are saying about the strikers being unrealistic is ridiculous.
They
Back
are
in the
living in a completely different reality. There's some dedication that goes into art, writing, or putting to care into someone's work. But then there's business owners like Bob Iger. They just like, we don't really care. We're just gonna, wait for the writers' strike over. They lose their apartments. That's what he said. One of the business owners, they said, I don't know who it was, but they said like, we'll wait for the writers' strike to be over and the writers lose their apartments. That's what he said. Yeah, it's just insane with the business owners. They have no sense of like creativity. They're just there for the money.
It's literally like Margaret Thatcher in the 80s, letting people lose their jobs and having these huge crises, all for the purpose of what? For the government making money and for the high ups making money, the 1%, these people, like, it's such a huge problem. In the 80s, the heads of the studios were making only 30 times more than their lowest paid worker, and that's still quite a lot. Now it's in the hundreds, it's in the 200s even. This is just such a huge issue, and it does relate to stuff like Secret Invasion. It relates to every single thing because everything has a human element. Every good thing that comes from these shows and these films, and all of that is the human element, is the work of the writers and the actors and the directors and everybody who deserves to be paid well, deserves to get those residuals, and deserves to have this work appreciated. Like, this show doesn't have a whole lot to enjoy, but that does not mean that it's worthy of being replaced by something that is made by a computer. At the end of the day, actors put genuine effort into this, writers put genuine effort into this, people put genuine effort into it. And I know there's a lot of people out there who really enjoy Secret Invasion, and good. People do enjoy all these things that you are getting rid of and butchering and tainting with AI and these things that are just a plague. It's horrible.
It's horrible, yeah. I just can't believe I just binged something that is just so painful to watch. Yeah.
We've had a really good run recently with Mission Impossible and Barbie and Oppenheimer, but I guess it had to come to a close at some point, and I guess it had to be Secret Invasion.
It's like a story, Tom. There's roller coasters. It's like a roller coaster.
Wow.
It's like,
our life is like Secret Invasion for real.
Exactly. I slammed on the desk, by the way, to show anger.
Well, what are you gonna give Secret Invasion out of 10?
1.
What? Jesus. Okay. I'm going 4.
Okay, I'm being a bit harsh actually. I'm gonna give it 3.
All right, not bad.
The actors try to do something here. Kingsley Ben-Adir, come on, man, he put so much.
Yeah, I really appreciated his performance, especially after watching Barbie. I was like, okay, this guy has range, and I appreciate that. And there's a lot of subtleties to his performance that I came to really appreciate, even though I didn't appreciate them at first. I agree with you there. But I think where we are at the moment with the strikes and all of that, even the bad stuff, you see the value in it. And I think that I do, even though we've just been talking about how much we dislike the show, and I did dislike the show, but there's a lot of me that sees the value in things that I wouldn't have before, in the actors trying hard in those scenes where the plot does have focus and stuff like that.
It's been such a weird whiplash for me, to binge watch Secret Invasion, because I was watching a different show, and that was a really good show, by the way. It was called Jujutsu Kaisen. It's just an anime show. That was really good. But then I had to watch Secret Invasion. I was like, no, I'm stuck in this spiral of terrible. No.
You were just having a great time, and then I called you.
I was vibing. I was having the time of my life. I was like, oh, hell yeah, Gojo. That's sick.
I've had worse. 40 minutes a week. Not too bad. For me, it made it better than some of the other bad stuff we had this year. But thank you, everybody, for listening. If you liked it listening on YouTube, you can like and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow and give us a 5-star review if you think we're worthy. And you can send us an email, ourstimefilmpod@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on whatever we do next week. I don't know what it is, but you can tell us, ask us a question, ask us any questions. I want to sit right here on the podcast next week. And I might actually insert what we're doing next week when I figure it out. So here's me saying what we're doing next week.
Elemental.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you.
And you can thanks Future Tom. Wow.
Thank
He
you.
really has all of his shit together. And you can follow us on Instagram at Alstein Film Pod to see our incredible thumbnails from Zain Afzal, on Twitter for more thoughts from me, and TikTok to see edited clips which are also on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And you can find links to all that in the description below. Thanks to Jones-Meyer for the excellent theme and Ronan Phillips for vocals, as always. And I think that is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take what you're given. Yes.
Give nothing back.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.